This hand starts with Patrick bragging about playing 5 days straight with 6 hours of sleep win $2.5 million.
I played one session, if you can count it as a session, for 5 days. 6-hour total sleep with just naps.
Yusuf limps a hand that should always be folded pre-flop. Pablo snap calls a turn raise with a hand that even blocks his own outs, and Yusuf is getting put to the test yet again with a tough river decision.
I always get what I want. And when I don't, it is because I didn't want it.
Or does he? Yusuf limps early position with a questionable hand. In the cutoff, Pablo Escobar decided to isolate the limper. His hand is on the cusp between open raising and folding. But when there is a limper involved, there are reasons to be tighter or looser, depending on the limper. If the limper has a tight range, likes limp 3-betting, or is a capable post-flop player, you should play tighter than GTO. Also think about that you almost have no fold equity pre-flop. But if the limper has a loose range, open raises his best hands, almost never limp 3-bets, or if you think he's a bad post-flop player, you should play looser than GTO. Once Yusuf limps, calling his hand is fine. To analyze this hand with PLO Mastermind, we analyze a cutoff versus big blind single raised pot. And we analyze the flop 8-6-2 two-toned, which is obviously pretty similar to 8-7 deuce two-toned. Yusuf decides to check and
Pablo Escobar
bets 40% pot, which is perfectly fine. Yusuf's combo draw is too weak to raise, and he makes the correct decision by calling the hand. On a turn, Yusuf decides to check. The solver likes to lead about 30% of hands with a 1/3 pot size. The reason is that Yusuf has more middling connected hands when he calls the flop c-bet, and so he has more straights. Apparently, Yusuf has the straight nearly 30% of the time, whereas Pablo only hit the straight 20% of the time. Pablo should mainly check with his hand. He does not want to get raised, where he does not know what to do against the raise. Moreover, when we consider that Yusuf has the straight 30% of the time, and it is likely that he does not lead often enough, Pablo should bluff way less on this turn card. Yusuf decides to raise. He should do that with all his nut straights and most of his 2 flush draw hands as a bluff.
Pablo Escobar
should absolutely fold his hand now, but he decides to continue. Because the bet sizes were different to the bet sizes of the solver, it is not possible to check the solver player here. But with 2/3 spot behind, in my opinion, Yusuf makes the right decision to check his hand. It is hard to get paid by something worse. Pablo Escobar decides to bluff his missed draw, which he should not do too often. He has a missed flush draw more often than a full house. Let's say he has a full house 25% of the time, a straight 25% of the time, and a missed draw 50% of the time. As a note, he should not have that many straights, because bad straights on a turn are showdown value and therefore not bet, and nut straights are often a 3-bet all in. We expect that he only bets a full house here to value. So he's only allowed to bluff about 10% of his range as a bluff, which is 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4 missed draws. As a remark, I personally thought Pablo has a full house less than 25% of the time. But in his bet call range on the turn, there are a lot of set plus flush draw and 2 pair plus nut flush draw hands. Moreover, some hands on the turn are bet folds, and nut straights are often bet raised on the turn. Yusuf recognizes that, is probably bluffing way too much here, and makes the right call, winning him a €72,000 pot. What can we learn from this hand? First, the reason I stated when being tighter or looser than the GTO open raise against the limper. Second, do not raise on a flop in a single raised pot with a weak combo draw, which is very likely dominated. Third, probably think about implementing a leading range on this turn, which mainly consists of A. Nut straights, B. Good draws which are not good enough to check raise, and C. Good blockers to continuing ranges. Fourth, all nut straights are bet in position, and all nut straights are raised out of position to a pot sizing, so there is no slow playing going on. Fifth, best bluffing hand on a 2 flush draw turn is any 2 flush draw hand with some additional equity. Sixth, do not overrate your implied odds when continuing on the turn against the pot sizing. And seventh, how your thought process should be. How many value hands and how many potential bluffs are in William's hand after the river on-lane.
I won like 2 point some million in that 5 days.
Wow.